Today, we have the honor of sitting down with the world's leading expert on the topic of human happiness, Dr. Arthur Brooks. Arthur has been named by Fortune magazine as one of the 50 greatest leaders in the world. As a social scientist, Arthur has studied happiness for many years and also teaches a class at Harvard on the subject. Notoriously, the class becomes sold out about as quickly as the Taylor Swift concert and has an extremely long wait list. In recent years, Arthur's work caught the eye of Oprah Winfrey, and together they released a book on the science of happiness in the fall of 2023, which immediately debuted at #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. We're excited for you to listen to today's conversation because few topics are as important to our daily lives than the pursuit of happiness. It's something we highlight on the homepage of our website and played an influence in the name of our company, Mighty Pursuit. Happiness is a thing we are all seemingly after, yet it seems so elusive and hard to define. Today, Arthur debunks all the myths that keep us from being happy. As he breaks down all of the latest discoveries in the field of social science, we gain a roadmap to a happier life. And so without further ado, Dr. Arthur Brooks. All right. Arthur, how you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Yeah.
You have one of the most fascinating jobs. You're a social scientist who studies the science of happiness.
Beats working.
Yeah. And I'd say it's a pretty relevant topic. I mean, when I just think about average conversations with people, it's just that phrase, like, I just want to be happy, like, comes up all the time. Like, if you think about what a parent wants for their child, it's like, I just want them to be happy. And then if you think about, like, a romantic relationship, and you have a friend who's asking you about your girlfriend or your boyfriend, they're like, oh, do they make you happy? And so why do you think it is that we want this so much? Why, and do we even, and it's kind of like hard to define if you were to ask somebody about it.
Well, most people don't define happiness. They just know that it's something better than what they currently have. And there must be some end state of perfect bliss, and that's where they want to get. And if they do everything right and get everything they want, all the relationships, all the resources, they get rid of all the pain, then suddenly they'll have it. And of course they don't get it, and nobody ever has, but that's the end state that everybody's going for. And so your original question, why? Well, of course, that's the question that philosophers and theologians have been asking from the very beginning. The whole concept is that everybody wants that. That's the most natural thing. We don't always act like we want happiness, but that's what people are built to want. In most religions, the whole idea is that you want God, but you can't get God. And so you're looking for some simulacrum for God on earth somehow. And that's what makes you look for the money and the power and the pleasure and the admiration of other people, because it has these godlike characteristics to it. And since we're made to be like God, we want to be with God. We're going to be searching for that. And that's our state of nature. More secular philosophers would say we want something better. We want something with less pain. And that's a normal thing. That's a good thing. That's a healthy thing. John Stuart Mill said there's nothing wrong with wanting to be happy. There's nothing wrong with that. The problem is we don't actually know what it is.
So when if you were to have a friend that asks you, does he make you happy? What are they even asking there?
They don't know. People just don't know. I mean, they think they know what it is when they feel it, but they can't quite define it. And that's the reason, that's the first question I ask my students on the first day of class. You know, it's a popular class. It's a very popular elective at the Harvard Business School. I have
it's sold out, right?
Yeah, 400 on the waiting list. And there's a secret Zoom link they think I'm not aware of. It's for the kids with COVID, and it turns out there's like 135 people on it. There's not that many people with COVID. And I say, okay, you worked hard to get into the class. Good for you. Congratulations. What is it? Right, and I cold call them, which is what we at Harvard we call when you pull people out of the class and make them answer a question they're not prepared to answer. And they always say the same thing. Happiness is the feeling I get when I'm with the people that I love. Or happiness is how I feel when I'm doing what I enjoy. And I say, that's beautiful. That's wrong. That's wrong. Good news, happiness isn't a feeling. That's the biggest mistake people make. All they can come up with is happy feelings. But that's like saying, I say, okay, what's Thanksgiving dinner? And you're like, it's the smell of the turkey. Now, what are you talking about? That's just evidence of Thanksgiving dinner. Feelings are evidence of happiness. And so when people are trying to maximize their feelings, that's like trying to get the strongest smell so you can finally get satisfaction at Thanksgiving. You're going to be frustrated in much the same way, and that's where the science starts.
Was it always this way? I mean, I get a sense maybe if you look at previous centuries, that maybe honor or something else was like the highest virtue or thing, a kind of thing that would have dominated conversations. Was happiness always the thing that people talked about and were after?
Yes, but they wouldn't always talk about it in the same way. And there's always been competing theories of what it is. So the concept that we have of actually trying to feel better, that actually goes back to Epicurus. That's a whole school of Greek philosophy, which is the minimization of turbulence in your life. To want to have the maximum amount of comfort in your life is the essence of happiness. But that's a hedonistic understanding of it. As a matter of fact, hedonism comes from that school. It doesn't mean what we think of it today, which is, drunkenness and debauchery. It's more the absence of things that steal your peace. That's really what Epicurus was talking about. He actually started a cult. And so he had a compound. He's very rich. He had a compound of all these young people kind of lying around, reading profound books and having these really deep conversations. And that's what happiness was supposed to be. So there's nothing new about how we talk about it today. Through most of history, however, there was a concept that there was a competing school in Greece that was typified more by Epictetus, the slave teacher, the teacher of emperors, who was actually born a slave, or Marcus Aurelius, who was he was a Stoic, the great Stoic philosopher, who was the Roman emperor. And what they talked about was this idea of eudaimonia. It's more Aristotelian. So Aristotle really talked about a good life well lived that's going to have suffering, but that's part of happiness too. It's how you bear up under suffering that defines whether or not you're happy, because suffering is inevitable. That idea of eudaimonia is a more balanced perspective on it. But of course, it's Stoic, right? And so what we're balancing today is these two ideas, the Epicurean idea and the Stoic idea, and people kind of range. I mean, I find people all the time who are more Stoic in their concept of happiness, and some who are more Epicurean in their concept of happiness. I often use that as a way to understand people, as a matter of fact. Just go back to the ancients. There's nothing new under the sun.
So do you think that happiness is like a good goal in life?
No. Happiness is a good goal in life, which means, I didn't make that up. My co-author, Oprah Winfrey, we were talking about this originally, and she was kind of banging her head on this idea. It's like, you're a scientist in this, and you're telling me that I can't be happy, but you study happiness? And I said, yeah, correct, because you can't get rid of all your negative feelings. You're not going to get rid of your negative experiences as this side of heaven. You're not. So therefore, perfect happiness is unattainable. She said, so what's the goal? I said, getting happier. She said, happierness? She's good with words. I said, yeah, you've encapsulated the last 30 years of my research in like 5 minutes. Yeah. But that's really what it is. It's progress. It's getting better at it. It's understanding the mistakes that we tend to make, which is this incredible adventure. Yeah. It's the adventure of a lifetime, because you actually can make progress. The more you know, the more you practice, and the more you teach it.
Yeah. One of the things that I just thought was so remarkable about your book is that, while happiness is in some ways abstract in the way that we talk about it as a culture, the way you broke it down was just very kind of tangible, and it gave you kind of goals in terms of the macronutrients of happiness. So can you just talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So we talked about the metaphor of the Thanksgiving dinner and the smell of the turkey. And if feelings aren't happiness, then what are they evidence of? And the answer is a meal. And a meal is multifaceted. So you could say, what's your Thanksgiving dinner? And you would say, well, it's these dishes or these ingredients. But if you're kind of a scientific nerd about food, like me, you'd say, well, all food is just protein, carbohydrates, and fat. That's all food. And if you want to be healthy, you need to understand, those are called macronutrients, macros. And you need to understand your macros and consume your macros in balance and abundance. Don't get all carbohydrates. It's bad for you, right? But don't have these weird restrictive diets where there's nothing of one. That's generally the healthiest approach that'll actually give you a pretty good life. Well, the same thing is true with happiness. The happiest people have 3 macronutrients that they're getting in balance and abundance. They're not neglecting any of them, and they're not focusing entirely on one. And those 3 macronutrients of happiness are enjoyment, satisfaction, and meaning, where you need to enjoy your life. And that's no small feat. That's not pleasure. Enjoyment and pleasure are different. And so figuring out that and how to live that way is it's a important life goal. Satisfaction, which is the joy that you get from your achievements after struggle. And in that is contained so much of the pathos of life. And most importantly, it's meaning. The meaning of life, the why of your life. And that has all of these twists and philosophical turns to it. Why do things happen the way they do? What are my goals and what's my direction? Why does it matter that I'm alive? All of those types of things go into that. Each one of these macronutrients has a whole science behind it that starts with philosophical concepts, a whole bunch of neuroscience for the mechanism of action and how they work in our brains, the evidence that shows what we can do to maximize them, and then the commitments that we need to make it so.
Yeah.
And so each one is this project. And it's so fun.
Yeah. What I think is interesting is, those are tangible. And then we zoom out and we talk about kind of a more abstract idea that culture talks about happiness. But one thing I feel like that's universal is people feel like their circumstances are in the way of being able to achieve those things. And what I found to be so remarkable about your book is you had the example of your mother-in-law, right? And how she got happier over life in face of difficult and trying circumstances. And then also there's a professor in there that we were talking about that had a terminal cancer diagnosis. And so that illustrated to me that circumstances don't necessarily have to be a deterrent. But I mean, if I think about somebody that has a health issue, right? They have a variable now that's like in their life that another person might not be dealing with that would be interfering with this whole happiness equation. Even I think about myself, like past couple of weeks, I've had just chronic daily headaches, right? And so like that kind of interferes with this whole ecosystem to some level. And so what would you say about that? Just the role of circumstances in general, maybe even mental health issues, maybe your financial needs or your basic needs aren't being met. A homeless person on the street or something that, they're down and out and they don't have any means at all. And so can people universally have access to happiness? I guess what I'm asking.
We have universal access to happiness.
Yeah.
And your circumstances can get in the way.
Yeah.
Now, negative circumstances don't actually lower your happiness. What they do is they increase your unhappiness. And this is a non-trivial distinction.
What does that mean?
So people think of unhappiness as the absence of happiness. That's not true. Unhappiness and happiness come from the affect levels, the mood levels in your brain that are positive and negative. You have emotions, you have these feelings as a way to signal to you that something going on outside of you is either a threat or an opportunity. The only reason you have negative emotions, which we all do, and there's only 4, by the way, fear, anger, disgust, and sadness. Those are the only 4 negative emotions, which we get in these combinations according to circumstances, is because we're perceiving something as a threat, and we need an aversive feeling such that we will avoid whatever that happens to be. That's the whole reason for emotions. Negative emotions are super valuable. They keep you alive. You'd be dead in a week without them. People talk about, I don't want any bad feelings. You're doomed if you somehow get rid of your bad feelings, which is why Epicurus was wrong, right? Yeah. And why you need to learn to love negative emotions and be grateful for negative emotions, but you also need to manage them so they don't become exaggerated and maladapted. It's the whole point. Positive emotions like joy and interest and positive surprise, these are emotions that say there's an opportunity out there to get some calories, to propagate your genes, to speak euphemistically. I mean, it's important that we understand that those are approach signals as opposed to avoidance signals. Now, all this is to say that the emotional balance that we have is not something that we should regret. It's something we should understand, that we should learn to live with, that we should learn how to manage. And that starts with understanding the science and then adopting certain habits. And that's a lot of what we're talking about. Now, it doesn't mean that people don't have negative circumstances. That's giving them a big surplus of negative emotions quite appropriately. It means that everybody can learn to manage the emotions that they have according to their circumstances and get happier or less unhappy, as the case may be, and then work to actually change your circumstances while continuing to manage yourself. So this is what a lot of people learn the hard way when they have something really bad that happens, when they have somebody who dies that they love, when they're left at the altar, and metaphorically or literally, when their business goes bankrupt, when they get thrown out of school, when they get a dread disease and they're afraid every single day. The vast majority, they have no choice but to live in a whole lot of bad circumstances leading to aversive emotions in a higher degree than they've ever had before. And something like 90% wind up with what we call post-traumatic growth.
Yeah.
We're always hearing about post-traumatic stress, right? And it's a real thing, right? But way more interesting than that is post-traumatic growth, which is more frequent and a bigger part of all our lives. And so what's going on here, once again, is don't lean out from the bad experiences in your life, these bad circumstances in your life. Really on the contrary, lean in, because you're going to have the emotions that are going to train you and help you, and then you're going to know yourself, and that learning and that growth will wind up making you a much happier person as you move forward, if you're lucky enough to be able to move forward, which not everybody is.
Yeah, nothing is guaranteed.
Well, no. I mean, if you got cancer and you're scared of that, what are you afraid of? You're afraid it's going to kill you. And the reason you're afraid is because it might. And newsflash, we're all dying. It's just that when it becomes proximate, when it feels a little too early, is when it gets our attention. But what you find is that people who actually survive something that's a mortal danger like that, they're not afraid of it anymore. They're not afraid.
Yeah.
That's a superpower.
Yeah. I mean, I'm all about, health, nutrition, fitness, longevity, and these ideas that we talk about a lot. But there's this other side of life that, if we talk about that so much, it's almost by omission that we don't talk about death and disease. And because those things, and
it's the enemy.
Yeah. Let's just say you're a health nut.
Yeah.
And then you get a disease. It's like your whole life you were trying to plan for this not to happen, and then you do, and then now you're thrown into this conundrum of what you're talking about, of you have to deal with that and the circumstances surrounding that. And there is like you're talking about, the possibility of post-traumatic growth, which I think is fascinating. One thing that I wanted to cover, because it's at the top of our homepage, but we discussed the pursuit of happiness, and the name of our company, Mighty Pursuit. There's some influence there.
For sure, it's very American.
Yeah. And so you laid out 4 of these in your book. We kind of added 6, but there are these kind of destinations of happiness that people are after. And so money, fame, success, power, beauty, and pleasure. And so in the whole idea of it being a destination, it's like, if I get that, then I'm gonna, I don't know, in our mind think we're gonna end this never-ending permanent state of bliss where I just have now made it in life. And so why do you think we're consumed by pursuing those things? Why are they so attractive?
Because Mother Nature wires us to think that that's the end goal. Mother Nature doesn't care if you're happy. She doesn't. She's lying to you all day long.
How would you define who Mother Nature is?
Mother Nature is your inherent animal desires to procreate and survive another day. You're driven by these desires to do the things that will help you rise in a hierarchy. We're a hierarchical, kin-based tropical species. Some of that will actually fall away with innovation, like coats. So we don't have you and I don't live in tropical places. But we're not going to get away from kin-based. We're not going to get away from hierarchies. We're not going to. And so the result of that is we get more mates, we get more calories when we're actually able to rise. And so the result is we want to actually acquire resources that positionally give us a higher status, more money than we need. Why would you want 5 watches, man? Because you want to show to other people that you have watches you don't even need. So you have a surplus of resources. You might as well come and have my children. That's really what your brain is doing, because Mother Nature wires that into you. And you want to be happy. You're driven to do these things. You want to be happy, and your wires cross. So you think, since I want to be happy, and I want to do these things. If I get these things, then I'll be happy. Wrong. Yeah. That's where the whole thing goes south. Now, I'm not the first person to recognize this, of course. The best description of this actually comes from Aristotle, but it's defined and described for the modern times, sort of modern times, by Thomas Aquinas, the 13th century monk and philosopher and theologian who wrote the Summa Theologica, his masterwork in 1265, where he talked about the idols. Now, his fundamental hypothesis was everybody wants to be happy. Why? Because everybody wants to be close to God. That's what we really, really, really want. But we can't define it. And by the way, doing all the God stuff is very inconvenient. There's tons of rules, a lot of one-sided conversations, a lot of doubt. So we say, is there something more tangible around here that has kind of like godlike characteristics? We talked about this a minute ago. Oh yeah, look at that. Getting rich feels sort of godlike. Power, really godlike. Pleasure, that's like heaven.
Yeah.
A status, admiration, Instagram followers, whatever your thing is, it feels a little divine. And so we chase those things, which of course is 180 degrees off God himself. We're going in exactly the wrong direction because something looked like God, but wasn't God. And so his explanation, as a pretty good social scientist, is that we chase these idols. Now here's where the plot thickens. Aquinas says, and subsequent research has verified, that we don't chase all four: money, power, pleasure, fame. Those are the four. That's a good exhaustive list, by the way, of the idols that we chase because we think if we get them, we will be happy because of this crossed circuit.
Yeah.
We all have one, that everybody's got one. That was Thomas Aquinas's hypothesis, our main idol.
All it takes is getting to know somebody.
Yeah. So this is a game I play with my students called What's My Idol? You want to play?
Sure.
All right, you ready?
Yeah.
All right. So the way to find your idol is not by me telling you to tell me what you're most attracted to on that list: money, power, pleasure, and admiration. Let's eliminate the ones you don't care about. Because we're always really, really prideful of these virtues that aren't virtues. They're just a lack of particular vices.
Yeah.
I mean, people are so funny. So money, it's in your head, right?
Yeah.
Power over other people. Pleasure feels good. Fame, that's this stuff, right? You got to get rid of one. Which one do you get rid of?
I'd probably say fame.
You'd say fame. You don't care.
Yeah.
You don't care if nobody knows your name. Nobody recognizes you on the flight.
Yeah.
You don't care.
No.
Okay. Fine. Now I would love to know why, right? You know, what's in your psyche that makes you not want that one. But let's go on. Now it's money, power, pleasure. Money, power, pleasure. You got to get rid of another one. And this is going to be a little less comfortable. Obviously, sort of by process of elimination. What do you get rid of next?
I would say probably power.
Yeah, so you don't like having power, or you probably don't like people having power over you, and so you're a little uncomfortable having power over the other people and telling them what to do.
Yeah.
Okay,
No,
good.
that would be accurate, sure.
Good. Okay, so now it's going to get warm in here because we're talking about money and pleasure.
Yeah.
You probably like both,
Yeah.
but you got to get rid of one. What's it going to be? As a pursuit, there's always going to be some of it in your life.
As a pursuit. Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely I'm attracted to feel good emotions and pleasure, but I would probably do away with that one because I would prefer the security of money.
Now we know.
Yeah.
Now, here's what Aquinas says, and all of the modern research verifies. Once you know your idol, you're identifying the thing that will always, in retrospect, have been the reason you made decisions that you regret. Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
You'd be like, I shouldn't have done that. Yeah, I accepted money that if I'd passed on that, I think I'd be happier today.
Yeah.
I took that job that I wanted a little bit less because it gave me a little bit more security. I don't think that was the right decision, right? I wish I had taken less money and paid somebody else more. I wish I'd done that. Those are always the decisions that are not huge regrets. You're not going to go rob a bank, I don't think, right? But there's always going to be something where you're going to kind of cut the moral corner.
Yeah.
You're going to miss the moral opportunity. That's the reason. And if you know that in your life, according to Aquinas and according to everybody subsequent to Aquinas, up to and including everybody today, you got power, man. If you know your idol, you have power because you know yourself, you know your weakness, and you're being honest with yourself, maybe for the first time in a long time.
I feel like we've lost because of the God piece that you were talking about, because our secular has become largely non-religious, especially in coastal cities. We've kind of like lost the language for that. I think it's something that you can intuitively locate, that you are after those things.
Right.
But it's not like we talk about it in the language of idols. And then the two that we added are really a product of the late 20th century, 21st century of success, right? So you have the Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg,
right.
All these people, tech entrepreneurs, things that didn't previously exist before the age of the internet. And so all of a sudden it's a whole wave of people that want to be super successful, and they feel it, and their parents are pushing them to be successful. I think a lot of the pressure from Gen Z specifically, going to college, what people get applauded for. And then the other one obviously is beauty,
right,
and beauty standards, people's inclination to even maybe get cosmetic surgeries, and that if they could just like fix their appearance, and that other people would be attracted to them.
That actually folds into admiration.
Yeah.
That fourth, or the honor.
Yeah.
That's what beauty does. Because the reason that you want to be more beautiful is not, you wouldn't do it if you were on a desert island.
Yeah, I've said this
right?
before.
You know, you do it because you want somebody else to look at you and say, huh, right? Or whatever it happens to be. That is the fourth idol. That's a facet of the fourth idol. Success is a facet of money, power, and honor.
Yeah, they're related.
Well, they are, for sure. The reason you want success is the same reason you want those things. I mean, in a way, the reason you want money, more money than you need, is so that you appear successful, such that you can rise in the hierarchy. This is basic.
Or that you can become powerful.
Yeah, well, this is the evolutionary psychology, evolutionary biology that undergirds most of social science and neuroscience today, as a matter of fact. So, yeah, you can break it out into these two subcategories because they're so profound and so evident in life. But again, it doesn't matter. It's all the same stuff. These are all idols.
So why do they fail us?
Why do they fail us? Because they don't satisfy. Because they actually, and we have empirical evidence, all that we could possibly want that should satisfy anybody, that when people get these things in the absence of the thing that they really want, which is love, they're unhappy. They're unhappy. Now, some of them are worse than others. What you find is that they're all intermediate goods that can actually be used for good things.
They're not inherently bad.
No. On the contrary. I mean, people say that money's evil. It's not evil. The problem is it's harder to be happy because it's easy to stop when you get money, as opposed to saying, oh, that's something that I can use for great good, right? You have to see it as a bridge to something that really is great good, to serve other people in the spirit of love, for example. That's what money is really good at. Power is something that you can use such that you can, with authority, bring a more just, better society. For example, you can run a company where there's prosperity and opportunity and growth if you use your authority with a spirit of justice and love. But it has to be an intermediate good. Admiration is really interesting. So I'm a Christian, and one of the things that I know is that the greatest tools of apostolate meaning, and evangelical Christians call it mission, right? I'm Catholic, so we call it apostolate. We have to have a hard word, because we have to do complicated stuff. The greatest tools are friendship and excellence. Those are the tools of apostolate. If you're impeccable, if you're admirable, if you're great at what you do, people are going to want to know your secret. And if your secret is the gospel and cross of Jesus Christ, people are going to say, tell me more. That's apostolate.
Yeah.
That's how you use admiration. But there's so much danger to it, right? Because if you stop there, the dissatisfaction that will come is like, I'm stopping at the Booth Tarkington, rest stop on the New Jersey Turnpike. I don't like this place. That's because you want to go to New York. You stopped on the on the Parkway on the way there, and you don't know what to do. You think this is the goal, and you're like, I don't want to eat every meal at this place.
They feel like moving targets almost, in a sense. It's like, I could say, okay, I'll be happy if we get 1 million followers on Instagram, and then you get there, and okay.
Yeah, well, that's, for
it's
sure.
It's like a movie, and you could, anything, right? It could be, I get a cosmetic procedure, and I thought I'd be, like, just content, but now I'm not. Or it could be I had $10 million, now I want 20, now I want 100 million, or whatever. And so they just feel like moving targets. And there was a colleague of yours at Harvard that coined the term arrival fallacy.
Yeah, arrival fallacy. And again, this is all related to the fact that they don't satisfy, which Aquinas talked about and Aristotle talked about, but we see abundantly in the data that when you stop with one of these intermediate goods, it won't satisfy you for more than a minute. There's a reason for that. It'll elevate your mood, but then you'll homeostatically go back to your mood baseline and conclude that you needed more. So the way to think about this is that you have the wrong formula for satisfaction. You think that satisfaction is directly correlated with a function of what you have. It's not. Real satisfaction that's enduring is a function of your haves divided by your wants. Haves divided by wants. Now, don't try to maximize the numerator. Try to decrease the denominator. If you decrease the denominator, it's way more efficient. You don't need to have more. You need to want less. That's what it comes down to. You need to want less of these things and substitute these more transcendental desires that we have that are about love and about higher things. Now, the arrival fallacy is related to this that you just mentioned. The arrival fallacy is the idea that I love making progress. So once I get to the goal, that is the trajectory of my progress, then it's bliss, right? And in a cosmic sense, I believe it is, because that's called heaven. I want one foot in front of the other, one day after another, one day at a time. And I want to make a little bit of moral progress, a little bit of spiritual progress, a little more love every day. And the end goal is I go to heaven. That's what I want. Yeah. And I believe that we're wired for that. And even if I'm wrong that we're not wired metaphysically for that, I do know that we are wired psychologically and biologically for this, to think that the goal of my desires, of my progress, must be better than the progress itself, and that's wrong. That's the reason that Olympic gold medalists often fall into a clinical depression after they win.
That's crazy.
It's not. It's exactly what you think.
From what you would think would happen.
Yeah, yeah,
crazy.
And for sure. No.
Yeah.
It seems illogical, but there's a reason that diets don't work. Now, we can talk about the biology all day long, but the psychology really explains it. Every day you step on the scale when you're on a stringent diet, not eating what you like, and the scale is lower, you're like, it's awesome. Totally worth it. Well, what happens when you hit your goal? You know what your reward is? You never get to eat what you like ever again for the rest of your life. Congratulations. This is the reason that about a third of people on big diets will continue dieting after they hit their goal and developing an eating disorder. That's why, because we're wired for progress. Yeah. And then once the progress stops, it's just all straw in your mouth. It's no good.
One of the things that was just so eye-opening and revolutionary sense in your book was that, we talked about how these things aren't, bad or good, but they can be launching pads into what you coined the big four, like the things that actually will bring happiness. And so
I had the bad four: money, power, pleasure, fame. Might as well have a good four.
So what do you mean that they are effective in serving the big four?
They actually satisfy. You got to look for the things that actually satisfy you, and they're not the things that your animal nature wants. Your animal nature wants you to rise in the kin hierarchy. That's what your animal nature wants. But what your higher nature wants, that transcends these strictures of Mother Nature and the economy and the marketing colossus all around us, is love. And love has different facets to it. And again, this sounds like it's really highfalutin or totally spiritual, but no, I'm just being a scientist when I talk about it this way, because
even if you look at attachment theory, I mean, it'd be pretty obvious that love is
No, people want love.
Yeah.
People want love. And again, we have, in the Harvard Study of Adult Development here, it's run by Bob Waldinger over the medical school here at Harvard. I mean, he has 85 years of data following the same cohort of people. And he and the guy who ran it before him say that, the conclusion of how to be happy and well when you're old is to have more love in your life. Happiness is love, full stop. So then the question becomes, how do you express your love? How do you receive and get love? And the four big ways to do it in most people's lives, and this makes the virtuous four activities to think about, is your faith, or your philosophy, by the way, because, I'm not going to, scientifically speaking, I have no way of saying that my own Catholic faith is the right way. And I do have data that show that lots of non-religious people get the benefits of a transcendent lifestyle where they transcend themselves. But it has to be something that's a more love of the divine, as you understand it. Love of your family, which is your kin, whether they're adopted or not. Love of your friends, real friends, not deal friends. And there's a distinction that's really worth making in modern society today. The apex of those two categories has really one person in it who's both family and friend, and that's your spouse.
Yeah.
And last but not least is the way that you can express your love for all humanity. Most of us are not, Warren Buffett or Bill Gates. We don't have that kind of dough, so we can't just kind of sprinkle resources out of a helicopter. But we do get to go to work every day, and the way that we do our work should be, if we want to be happy, an expression of our love for all humanity by doing our work with joy and a spirit of service.
So if you zoom out and you're like, okay, people are after, money or fame or whatever, can you give me an example of how would let's just take success. How could success serve those big four? You've achieved whatever success, whatever that is.
Yeah.
And how could it serve
So
those things?
you need to understand success broadly. The problem that a lot of people have who are listening to us and just walking around the street, you live in New York City, it's full of it, is this very, very narrow definition of success, which is how I'm doing in my job.
Yeah.
How much money I'm making, how much money is in my account. That is a desiccated understanding. It's largely based on a very common addiction. We talk all the time about workaholism. Workaholism is a secondary addiction to success addiction. Success addiction is one in which it has the same neurobiology of any other addiction that implicates a neuromodulator called dopamine, where you actually get a burst of this anticipation of reward when something goes right for you in one area of your life. You get an A on the exam, you get into a good college, you get out of a good college, you get a good job, you get a raise, you get a promotion, and these are the little taps of the little spritzes from the locus ceruleus in your brain of dopamine. Psss, and success addicts, it's like a fire hose in there, right? Tapping also the pleasure centers of your brain, the ventral tegmental area, the ventral striatum. These are the parts of the brain that are stimulated when you get these experiences. That leads to workaholism as a secondary addiction. That's all very desiccated understanding of what true success is. On the contrary, a successful life is one in which you have your relationships on point. Real success at work is one in which you're expressing your love fully for humanity in the way that you serve others and earn your success every single day. But remember, there's also success in your family life, success in your friendships, success in your transcendental life, and that's how you need to understand success in a fulsome way, in a holistic way.
What about like wealth? How could that serve the big four?
How could wealth serve the big four?
Yeah.
Wealth makes it actually possible for you to do a lot for a lot of people. You can do more for more people when you have wealth. Now, again, there's real limits on that. Once you get to your 10th billion, it's not clear that looks an awful lot like you're chasing the billions, but no criticism, because I haven't been in that situation. I'm very unlikely to be in that situation. But the whole point then is not how much, but what are you doing with how much? And if your ambition is to do something beautiful and big with a lot, then having a lot is great. But if you're just trying to earn the money, there's all this, what is it called, effective altruism movement?
Yeah.
That's basically just get as rich as you can so you can give it away. I asked a teacher of mine in South India, Sri Nochur Venkataraman, who's a great guru in South India, and I asked him about this effective altruism movement. What do you think about getting rich so you can give your money away? He goes, that sounds an awful lot like getting your shirt dirty so you can wash it. That sounds like an exercise in moral futility is how he thought about it. So I think it's a perilous path. It's possible in a lot of cases, but it has to be for something else, and that for something else should be based on love.
Yeah, I think you can immediately identify, like even with like fame or something like that, how that would also translate and how you are using your platform. Admiration
of other people and driving them to something better and more beautiful.
And I think there's some wide example. I mean, you wrote the book with Oprah. I think she's a really good example of living that out, and I'm sure you got to see that in like a personal level.
It's incredible. It's people ask me all the time, what'd you learn from Oprah Winfrey? And it's like, how to sell books. No, that's not the right answer. The right answer is how to be the same person in public and in private. It's incredible. I've known who she is since I was a kid practically. Yeah. And because she's been famous her entire adult life. And around her dinner table at her home, California, just the two of us talking about the book, talking about life, she's the same person. It's incredible. She has perfect integrity between public and private.
Yeah.
It's a great secret because... And I tried to figure out, how do you do that? How does she do that? And the answer is all of the good that she has is so she can do more good for others.
Yeah.
And not very many people can achieve that. That's an incredible witness.
She go down the whole list, the wealth, but then the power as well, becoming the first, I think, self-made woman billionaire. Mm-hmm. There's all these accomplishments that she's had, and
she's she holds it lightly. Yeah. She holds it lightly. She helps others. She inspires other people. She thinks about other people and their good all the time.
Yeah.
She talks about other people's good all the time in private.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
That's really cool. So when I think about the 4 pillars, the first thing that really struck me is the accessibility of those pillars to the average person. Obviously, that's kind of like a moving target, depending, like, let's just say you have a dysfunctional family or you feel like you don't have friends or whatever. But I would say, from an outsider's point of view, it would seem that they're more attainable than I want to become a billionaire.
Oh, yeah.
But
that's why people want them less too, by the way.
Yeah.
It's a less exclusive club. There's no rope line to faith. Yeah. It's a pure public good. It's non-excludable.
Yeah.
Right? You can have a relationship with God, and I can have a relationship with God. It's not like God's like, sorry, dude, I'm listening to Arthur right now. There's none of that. And that's not how we see it. I can have a happy family, and you can have a happy family.
It made me think about, you wrote, if you want to make yourself happier, you already have everything you need to do so within you at any moment, at this moment today. Why do you feel like people find that to be so irritating sometimes? Of like the phrase of like, you have everything that you need right now. Yeah. It goes like, sometimes it could go in one ear and out the other. It's like, no, not really. And
I mean, people,
it's true.
For some people, there are more barriers.
Yeah.
And they're not thinking about the resources. They're always thinking about barriers. Yeah. We have a negativity bias as the human species. Homo sapiens pays attention more to the negative than the positive, because the negative could kill you. The positive is nice to have. We literally have more brain tissue dedicated to identifying threats than opportunities, because the tiger chasing you is a much bigger deal than maybe that gazelle that could have gotten away. So the result of that is that we're always thinking about the barriers to our happiness as opposed to the opportunities to our happiness. And we need to be more acutely aware of the fact that we're surrounded by opportunities to get happier and not be focused on the barriers constantly. I mean, I get it. Some people have more barriers than others. I completely get that. But the opportunities for almost everybody are more abundant than they see, and they need to be reminded of that. Now, what I'm not trying to do is be glib, like those bumper stickers that say, choose happiness. I want to run my car into those people. I mean, it's like, no way. Choose happiness? No. Do the work. Do the work. Then happiness is attainable, not just choosing it, right? I mean, it's like saying, choose the right spouse and you'll have a perfect marriage. No. Make a good choice and then do the work until your dying breath. Then you got a shot at it. Same thing with happiness.
That's good. So, big 4: family, friendship, faith, and work. I noticed that things like nutrition, fitness, physical well-being, obviously topics that are important to both of us, weren't on that list. Like, is this an exclusive list where you can find enjoyment, satisfaction, and fulfillment in, or is there a more extensive list?
Well, there are 10,000 things that you can do, but the big 4 are faith, family, friends, and work.
Okay, so
now the things that you're mentioning, however, are really important, but they're on the happiness list. They're on the unhappiness list.
Yeah.
So when you talk about health and fitness and et cetera, those are ways that you can moderate negative affect very, very effectively. So I do a lot of talks about unhappiness as well. and what am I talking about? Not how to be unhappy or how to be less unhappy. And you have to be a very active manager of your unhappiness if you're the kind of person that has high negative affect. That's another way of saying a lot of bad mood. I do personality testing based on, called the affect balance. Do you have unusually high positive mood naturally? Unusually high negative mood naturally? You can have both. That's called being a high affect person. That's me. I'm very high positive affect. I'm very high negative affect. Some people are low in both. Some people are high in one and low in the other.
I would say I'm similar to you.
There's probably, most entrepreneurs are actually, that's called the mad scientist profile. Yeah. High positive, high negative. That's what most entrepreneurs are, because they're like into it.
Yeah.
That's like, give me more life, more stimulus, bring it on, right? That's why you live the way you do and take the risks that you do. And building a media company, it's easier to work in a bank if you're not trying to stimulate this unbelievably high affect all the time. The problem with that life, or by the way, any high negative affect, which is half of the population has above average negative affect by construction, that you're going to need a strategy to manage that negative affect, or that's going to be getting in the way of your quality of life all the time. I know people who are very happy, but they have big unhappiness problems. When I'm coaching them, I don't have to give them happiness advice. I have to give them unhappiness advice. And one of the biggest ones that I always say is get yourself into the gym. Get into the gym. The least effective ways to manage your unhappiness are drinking, drugs, work, pornography. All of these are ways that people manage their negative affect.
Yeah.
And they're all super destructive. They lead to addiction, they lead to self-subjugation, they lead to the loss of self. One of the best ways to do it is to get healthy, is to beat yourself up.
Yeah.
Get in there, lift heavy things. Get a sweat going.
Yeah. So before we talk about the big four, I think you're talking kind of about these recipes for unhappiness, and there was two that kind of struck out to me in your book that really I think people struggle with a lot. And the first one is envy. You call envy like a happiness killer. And so you could have your eye on family, friendship, meaningful work, or faith. But if you're constantly fixated on what other people, so would you say that is kind of like one of those unhappiness lovers that you're talking about?
Yeah, envy's a happiness killer, and it's a very, very natural thing. Envy is an evolved trait. If you are naturally drawn to rise in a hierarchy, you have to know where you stand, and you have to have an ambition to get what somebody else has who's above you. It's just to find envy. And so envy is an incredibly natural thing. The problem is when it's out of control and is animating your life. That will make you miserable, is the way that turns out. There's all kinds of ways to think about it, but there are remedies to it that don't say, I'm going to get rid of something that's an evolved trait. Sorry, you're not. You're natural.
So what are the remedies?
The number one remedy is, stop paying attention to people that you envy who are not meritorious. There's two kinds of envy. There's malignant envy and there's benign envy. Malignant envy is envy of somebody who has something they don't deserve, right? And that's like the reality show stars. That's the people who are famous for being famous. The politicians who are just really doing well, even though they're
Hawk to a girl. There's this whole phenomenon of this girl that their TikTok video, but like overnight sensation from like a 5-second TikTok video.
Fantastic.
That was the past 2 months, and now she's been on podcasts, and those podcasts are getting like 1 million views, but literally off a 5-second TikTok video. Nice. Complete unknown, but it just makes me think about what you're
and probably will be unknown again soon.
Yeah,
and I mean, that's Andy Warhol's concept of in the future, everyone will have 15 minutes of fame.
Yeah.
That's where that reference actually comes from. But beyond that, I mean, sure, that's a good example. But there are people who are, in public life who are not meritorious and who are doing well. And you want to rip them down. That's called malignant envy. And then there's benign envy, where you envy somebody who has something that they really earned and you wish you had it because you wish you could be that kind of person. The astronaut, the person who's done something really extraordinary and has well-earned fame, but you're envious of it nonetheless. So there's a two-part move for you to be free of envy in the way that it'll hurt your life, while not actually trying to change your genetics, because good luck with that. Number one is to think about people as either malignant or benign in the way that you envy them. And the malignant people, you just stop paying attention to them. Just stop paying attention to it. It's just make it go away by looking the other direction. Right now, sometimes it's like the person is running for president or something like that. But you just don't have to be focusing on the fact that person has things that you believe they don't deserve. Yeah. You basically say, I have made the decision to pay less attention to that because that is actually hurting me. Mm-hmm. And you'll be amazed that the girl you were just talking about right now, I mean, she can go away if you look the other direction, right? The only reason she exists in anybody's mind, whoever this is because you're looking at it and you're drawn toward it when you see it, and you're like, can you believe it? That is so ridiculous, right? Okay.
It's literally the whole premise under the fame right now going on right there.
Yeah, for sure. But then we go to benign envy, which is also deleterious to your happiness. Now, the way that you deal with that is you take that envy and you turn it into admiration. See, admiration is a heavenly virtue, whereas envy is a deadly sin. Envy is the second deadliest of the deadly sins, according to Dante and his Inferno. So he's going down, the levels of hell. And, the very top are the ones like gluttony and lust and all this stuff. It's like, I ate too much. I shouldn't have slept with that person. Bad, but kind of human, carnal. But the lower you get are these sins of the sort of the deep morality. At the very worst is pride, because pride is the base of all other of these, deadly happiness-killing sins. Yeah. According to Dante, but according to, anybody with common sense. Right above that is envy. Bad. Not the worst, but really bad. It's the only one of the deadly sins, according to Joe Epstein, who's this great essayist. It's the only one of the deadly sins that's not even fun. Right? Not even fun in the moment. It's misery provoking. Okay.
Terrible.
So you got to turn it into, that's the reason that the ancient theologians, the medievals, talked about the heavenly virtues. Each one of the deadly sins has a heavenly virtue. You pivot to the heavenly virtue. You're feeling envy? Turn into admiration. I envy that person. I envy that person for all the good things that they've done. I'm going to write that person a note saying how much I admire her. It's like the balm of Gilead, man. It completely changes the rhythm inside your own brain because you've articulated the fact that you want that, and you're honest about it with you and her, and you've done something positive that makes you feel good and make her feel good. And that's the whole point of this free will that we have, moral free will, that you can try to sublimate and wipe out these dark feelings that you have, or you can just open up the window and turn them light. Yeah. And that's a good example of that.
That's so good. The other one, caring too much what other people think about you. I had a question about this because, you said almost all of us need to work to care less about what others think about us, but on some level, don't we need to care about what other people think of us?
Once again, you're not going to get away from it. The reason that you care about what other people think of you is because you live in a society and you're built to be a kin-based hierarchical being. And so the result of that is that if you don't care what anybody thinks, if you truly don't care what anybody in the world thinks of you, which people say that all the time, I wish I could be somebody who I don't care at all. Oh, really? You'd be fired, friendless, and divorced in a year.
Yeah.
You'd be walking the frozen tundra alone, at least in the Pleistocene you would have. You'd be on the savannah getting hunted down by a cheetah because you'd be by yourself. So you need to care what other people think of you. The question is what you care about. What do you want them to see that really matters? If you get stuck on the idols or the ones that you've added of success and beauty, if you want people to think about those particular things, you'll always be dissatisfied. You'll never have enough. You'll always be running. On the other hand, if you care that people see you as a virtuous person, as a caring person, as a loyal person, as a compassionate person, as a loving person, then you'll have enough.
That's good.
And you'll be working for something that's truly good, and you won't be laying awake at night thinking, you know what, old Joe over there, I wonder if he thinks I'm compassionate enough. That's not the way that we're wired. Yeah. But going against that wiring and substituting that kind of care for the opinions of others, for the ones that are naturally sitting on your genome, very possible, and that's the secret to getting happier.
Yeah, because on some level, I mean, you want your wife, you want your friend to feel the effects of your love, and
right.
So from some level, it's obviously you want them to think positively
right.
of how you're responding, and if they're not thinking positively about how you're responding, that is an indicator on some level in some situations that you might need to reevaluate.
For sure, you have to ask yourself,
yeah,
what do I want somebody to admire?
Yeah.
What do I want them to admire? Now, I know what I kind of deep down want them to admire, which is my money and, my beautiful flowing locks of hair. And for me, that's obvious, that's what I really want from people. But that's not what I want. What I want is people to admire my character. Yeah. And my virtue. That's what I want. And so that's what you work for, is what you want to want, not what you want at the most animal level. And about your spouse, you talk about this, interesting. The data are very, very clear that in particular, husbands want one big thing. It's not what you're thinking. I'm not going to make, this is a family show. The one big thing that they want is admiration. That's the one big thing that husbands want from their wives, is admiration.
Yeah.
Right? The problem is they don't know what they want to be admired for. You got to figure out what you want to be admired for before you start asking for admiration and trying to earn admiration. You want to be a good husband? You want to be a good and a great husband? Then start trying to do the thing that you want your wife to admire you for that is really worth admiring.
That's really good. So recipes around happiness, so let's talk about the 4 pillars. Family is a complicated thing because whoever's listening to this right now, I mean, there's just such a wide spectrum of people, like relationships that they might have with their family. And so How would you frame that one? When you say family, does that mean kin? Does that mean like an adopted family? What if someone has a fractured family life? Like, where would you start with that one?
It's pretty subjective and pretty expansive because at different cultures at different times we think of it in different ways. We largely think of the nuclear family in the United States, but we've been thinking of an extended family only 200 years ago.
Yeah.
And so it really depends, and it has a lot to do with the neurophysiology of how we define kin. There's a neuropeptide that functions as a hormone in the brain called oxytocin. We've all heard about it at this point. 20 years ago, it was quite obscure, and there was early research on it. It's excreted by the human brain when we have contact with our people. What's our people? It depends, right? Oxytocin is excreted when you see the person you're related to, and it's intensely pleasurable. It's your friends, to be sure. It's even more generally with your related family. It's the most with your kids. You have kids, right?
No.
You don't have kids yet. When you lay eyes on your firstborn child, if you have one, it's like the 4th of July inside your head because it's this explosion of oxytocin that's happening. That's bonding you to this child. It's like, I just met this squalling infant, and I would die for him. I would die for her. 2 days ago, I had my second grandchild was born, and I was at the hospital about 4 hours after. I mean, they don't call the grandparents to be in the hospital when the baby's being born, but I got there soon afterward, and he's sleeping, and he opens his eyes, and it's like, right? That's how we define kin in this particular way, and that's culturally non-specific. I mean, there are lots of times and places where that's quite different, and there are people that we adopt into our kin and get the same amount of oxytocin. One of my children is adopted, and I was doing oxytocin research at the time actually, and I had 2 biological children at that point. I'm like, I wonder if I'm going to get the same level of oxytocin when I walk in and they put this 15-month-old orphan in my arms. And I'm like, let's see. I'm such a social scientist. Like, yeah. Desiccated clinical understanding of love. And they brought her in, they put her in my arms, and she grabs my shirt, and she has these, little dark eyes, and she looks up at me, and it's like, all over again. Same thing. Same thing. And every time I see her, she's 21 years old. Every time she comes home, it's like that first day.
Yeah. So if you're trying to, let's just say in a place where you don't feel like you have the best relationship with your family, and you've talked about, I saw in other interviews, how like you had kind of a distant relationship with your parents. What would you say the starting point for those people should be?
You got to do the work. The whole point is that there are sort of 2 reasons that you don't have a close relationship with your family. Number one is that you're not doing the work. The other is there's some overt barrier, right? I never had a barrier with my parents or anything. I just didn't know them all that well. I moved to Europe when I was in my 20s, and I would see them just occasionally, and they were very interesting people. Very interesting people. My mother was a professional artist in the Pacific Northwest. My father was a brilliant mathematician. And I always thought, these are interesting people. I got to get to know them better. And then they died young. And my dad died when he was about my age now, a little older. My mom was, struggled with mental illness and was demented by the time she was my age. And it was terrible, right? I missed it. I just screwed up. It's like I wasn't there. It's a lot of people have a different problem, which is that they have some sort of conflict. And that conflict is usually exogenous. It usually comes from the outside that leads to a values breach. That's where most of these really bad conflicts with family comes from, where you disagree with something about the way the world works, and so I can't respect you and love you as a result of that. Both of those cases are completely avoidable. Do the work and don't fall for any phony, activist culture values breach with the people that you should love the most. It does not matter if dad is voting for Trump. It's still dad. Yeah. Right? Or Harris, I don't know. It doesn't matter as much as your love is the bottom line. It's like, I disagree with you. Yeah, you want some more turkey?
Yeah, it's about loving through difference.
It's just loving with no conditions. It's funny, I did all this research, but then I thought, okay, do my kids know that this is how I feel? So I remember telling one of my kids who was difficult adolescence. It's like, There's literally nothing you can do to make me not love you. You could rob a bank. I will come to the prison and love you. I won't bring a file and a cake. I won't break you out. But there's nothing you can do. There's literally nothing you can do. And it was freeing for me. It was like this weird look on his face of kind of relief when an adolescent child realizes there's no values breach that can actually lead to a rupture in the love relationship. Because look, I'm a Christian. I'm supposed to believe that God's going to love me no matter what. God's going to love me no matter what. Yeah. And so therefore, my job is to love my kids no matter what. And that's super freeing. It just simplifies life. And also, by the way, it makes family life better and it leads to happiness.
That's good. So friendship, explain to me what type of friends we should be going after to reap the happiness benefits there.
This is back to good old Aristotle. Our friend Aristotle was the best on friendship. I mean, still is the standard on understanding this taxonomy of friendship. And part of it was because Aristotle believed that friendship was the ultimate secret to the happiest life. So he wrote a lot about friendship in the Nicomachean Ethics and also in his Politics. In the Nicomachean Ethics, he said there's 3 levels of friendship that bring more happiness. And if you get stuck at lower levels, it's going to be a problem for your life. Okay. The lowest level is friendship of transaction, right? There's nothing wrong with it. It's just incomplete. This is like, we do business together. I don't know when your birthday is, and if we stop doing business, we're not going to be friends anymore. But we're really friendly toward each other and I like you, right? Okay, sometimes I'll buy lunch. Above that, I mean, if that's all you have, you're going to be hopelessly lonely. Above that is friendships of beauty that are based on admiration of another person. I really admire this work that you're doing. It's really, really good. And we're friends, and I just want to be around you. You're magnetic. It could be because of your physical beauty, your sense of humor, your intelligence, or your success. But I really admire it. It's not that I want it. I admire it. That's good. That's better. But if that beauty goes away, so does the friendship. The friendship that actually brings satisfaction, according to Aristotle, is called the friendship of virtue, also known as the perfect friendship, aka atelic. Atelic means it doesn't have a telos. It doesn't have a utility to it. It's useless. It's cosmically, beautifully useless. And so if you want to be happier, you need more useless people that you just love. Now, the characteristic of it, according to Aristotle, which is kind of interesting, is that you're walking together shoulder to shoulder into the future and looking at something that you both love mutually. There's always a third love in these perfect friendships.
So what are examples of that?
You and your wife love the faith together. Me and my wife, we love our kids together. You and your best friend love the Yankees. It can be dumb or it can be cosmic, but the whole point is that third love is the glue that makes that useless relationship beautiful and perfect to you.
What about vulnerability?
What about vulnerability?
Well, like I would imagine that has some sort of component, like I don't know if in Aristotle's like definition of a perfect friendship, but the idea of being deeply known by like another human being versus someone kind of knowing you on a superficial level.
Yeah, for sure. And that's actually the levels of, when you define vulnerability in that way, of being known, that gets higher as you get to the higher levels of friendship.
Yeah.
Right? You don't know your transactional friend that well. And that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah,
your beautiful friend, it's kind of asymmetric. You know more about one person than they know about you. Basically your friendship, but the atelic friendship, the useless friendship, the beautiful friendship, is one in which you have the greatest amount of knowledge for each other because you're truly interested in each other. You're truly known because you want to truly know, and vice versa. It's the way that works. And that doesn't mean you have to be like weep openly all the time and that kind of vulnerability. It means that you're just honest. Yeah.
This line you had in the book was just so good. The highest compliment you could pay a person is you are useless to me.
Yeah. I wouldn't say you're worthless to me. That's not the...
Oh, no, useless.
I know.
Yeah.
But people often use useless and worthless in a synonymous way.
But I knew what that meant when you were saying that.
For sure. It sounds funny, doesn't it? Because we have this useful culture.
Yeah.
Everything's got to be useful.
But if they can't do anything for you, that's like...
Even better.
That's even better.
Even better.
It's like you're loving them for them and they're loving you for you. And it's not like, oh, you're going to help me advance in my career. You're going to help me do this. Or
Yeah.
You know.
Here's the way you kind of think about it, because a lot of, in our culture today, a lot of close friendships actually start at work. That's fine. You know, one of the things that we find is that work satisfaction is best predicted by having a best friend at work. It's the best predictor of actually liking your job. And more than half of people who say they have a best friend at work wouldn't take a higher paying job. So they wouldn't be separated from their best friend at work. It's a very beautiful thing. Well, what happens frequently is that those relationships will progress from third level transactional friendships into real friendships. And here's how you know no longer really want something from that person anymore. So you can start off with, and I've had relationships with people that could really help me a lot in my career, could really help me a lot in my business.
Which serves a functional purpose. You need people like that.
Yeah, for sure. And there are people who did. And that now, I'm thinking about one guy in particular who's a super close friend of mine in Atlanta, and his name is Frank. And I don't want a contribution from Frank. I don't want that. You know, I want Frank's love and his friendship and his really super honest advice. I want him to tell me the truth. And I'd feel weird. I mean, we do stuff together. I mean, I sit on the board of he has a little foundation. I sit on the board of his foundation, and we do stuff together. But that's just the pretext for us to hang out and talk and be friends. Good. And I would feel uncomfortable if I were turning it back into a business relationship, because that's like lowering the level back to transaction. I don't want that.
The next pillar, meaningful work. I thought what was interesting when I was reading your book is that a lot of people might think that they have to have a specific job to be happy, but based on the research that you were citing, that's not actually true. And so you said the two components to meaningful work are earned success and service to others. Can you tell me about that a little bit?
Service, so it's true. I mean, the research suggests that you'll be unhappy if you can't pay the rent. Okay, so I'm not going to be making these wild, unrealistic claims that you could make no money and be perfectly happy when your kids aren't making their caloric needs. That's not the case. You need enough money to eliminate the sources of unhappiness, and most people get that money from the way they earn their daily bread. Okay, so get that off the table. But once you're above a certain level, money doesn't predict happiness in a job anymore. Status and position, title don't predict happiness in a job anymore. Quite the contrary. Sometimes the unhappiest people I meet in companies are the CEO, because they're filled with anger. It's hard being a chief executive. I've been a CEO before, and it's like, oh, I sure will be happy when I'm in the corner office. Are you kidding? I have hundreds of bosses, all my employees. It's tough. No, those aren't the predictors of happiness. Happiness comes when you feel like you're making progress and you're being rewarded and encouraged and recognized for your hard work and personal responsibility. Merit is everything when it actually comes to happiness and work. That's why loyalty-based systems and tenure-based systems are garbage. They actually they demotivate people, and they get rid of the best people. Nobody wants to be in a system where if you hang around long enough, you'll get ahead in the system if you're excellent. You're not going to be happy with your job doing that. And it's just how much you kiss up to the boss. That's super fun. And so loyalty and tenure-based systems are poison for happiness, and merit-based systems are terrific, but they're hard because if you're on the wrong side of it, you're going to be unhappy sometimes when you hear that you're in the judgment of somebody. You're not making the merit-based standard. And it's very hard to be the boss because you actually have to hold people to account. The second is more profound, of course, which is service to other people. You have to believe that you're needed for what you're doing. The essence of dignity is to be needed. The essence of despair is to be unnecessary, to be superfluous. That's what people in despair feel. That's the reason that unearned income is so problematic. People will often hide the fact that they come from wealthy families, that people do so poorly after they win the lottery. That's why it's so difficult to get on your feet once you're on long-term unemployment or welfare services, is because you feel superfluous to society. You feel like you're not creating value in society. You feel unneeded. And that's the essence of stripping away your dignity. That's a really important thing. And so all of us want to feel that dignity. And the way to do that is to serve other people and feel needed. If you're a boss, the secret to keeping people happy in the workplace is making sure that they really understand that their job is a service to other people and help them meet the people that they're serving.
That's really good. At what point would you say that someone needs to quit their job if it's coming almost we talked about the happiness, unhappiness. It's like really driving down the unhappiness.
Yeah. So I'm all about quitting jobs. I'm encouraging people to quit their job all the time. I've quit a lot of jobs in my life, not because I hated the job, but because I wanted to do new things. The reason that I recommend that people leave jobs is because they're not growing. You need to grow as a person, and part of growing as a person is what you do in your professional life, because that's one of the pillars. You should also be growing in your relationships. I don't recommend, getting married over and over and over again.
Yeah.
But it's worth pointing out that your job is not a relationship. Your job won't keep you warm at night. Your job won't love you. But it is a source of growth and opportunity and challenge. And when you're no longer getting those things, then it's time to actually look for something new if you can. Not everybody can, but if you can, I recommend it.
That's beautiful. The last one, I feel like in many ways and this is kind of how you ended that chapter, but bleeds into the last category of faith and finding kind of meaning. I thought I'm a follower of Jesus as well. And so I thought what was so interesting here is there was so much chatter, particularly maybe that peaked about 10 years ago, that faith and science were at odds. Yeah. But it's amazing that here science is kind of proving the need for faith in the happiness equation, which is just kind of amazing to me. And I've always looked at those two things of, whether you want to call it faith or spirituality and science as kind of two sides of the same coin, right? And so they're answering different questions, but you might see some overlap in the domains. But I've never, and from a logical standpoint, if you believe there is a creator, if you believe that God exists, then why would he have not created the material world and the spiritual world? Right. And so I've never seen those two things at odds. And so I thought it was amazing you wrote, transcendental beliefs and experiences aid dramatically in our efforts to get happier. And so can you talk about why that is?
We know just based on observation of the happiest people that people who have a sense of the transcendent, what they're able to do is to not focus on themselves. And the great secret to happiness is not focusing on you. That's why. Because Mother Nature doesn't care if you're happy, and she's making you focus on the psychodrama with you as the star constantly, which is stressful, and which is boring, and which is scary, and which is tedious, all at the same time. But you do it because that's, your full-time job is getting your caloric needs and passing on your genes, and so you're pretending as if you were the star, and that's all that really matters. But it won't make you happy. It won't make you happy. The secret to greater happiness is transcending yourself, either vertically to the divine or laterally to other people, but one way or the other, you have to transcend yourself. It's very efficacious to do so with respect to faith or philosophy, because this gives you a sense of awe of the universe. The key to getting happier, think of it this way, get smaller and make the universe larger. Get smaller, get little, right? Now, Mother Nature's like, don't get little, get huge. Right? Get as successful as you possibly can, and not only are you thinking about you all the time, you want everybody else to be thinking about you all the time. Then everything will be good. And that's misery. That's the secret of misery. You need to get little and go completely against those inclinations. That's the reason that this happens. Now, that's entirely different than talking about the relationship between faith and reason and whether one or the other suggests that the other is right. Right? That's a different set of questions. I'm just talking about the empirical regularities of happiness. Are you happier if you can get out of the psychodrama? Unambiguously, yes. By studying the Stoics and walking in nature and understanding the fugues of Johann Sebastian Bach and doing a Vipassana meditation practice, or like you and me, being on our knees, praying to Jesus. Right? Yeah. There's different ways to do that. But that's a different question about who's right and what's the metaphysical verities that we're trying to get at.
And I think it's interesting when you look at it we talked about the pathways to happiness or the idols before, and so there's been so many thinkers throughout history that would say that the right orientation to the universe is looking to God first, and then that gives you kind of the right orientation towards everything else. And so I think that's really interesting, and even the overlap in terms of all these categories and just the way of Jesus itself.
Well, there's a lot of new, very interesting neuroscience that tells us why that is, too. So there's the work of the great Scottish neuroscientist Ian McGilchrist, who 20 years ago, he wrote a famous book called The Master and His Emissary. And that was, The Master and His Emissary was not about God and his subjects. It was about the two sides of the brain. He's a neuroscientist and psychiatrist who writes about hemispheric lateralization of the brain. Now, back in the old days, we talked about left brain and right brain people, creatives and analytics, all that's nonsense. But the new science on hemispheric lateralization says that the right side of the brain governs the why questions, and the left side of the brain largely governs the what questions of life. Now, life is pushing you into the what side. Your screen and your social media and your STEM-based education and the details and distractions, you're stuck on the left side of your brain. But the why, those are right brain questions. So the God stuff is on the right side. And then you should be able to use the left side of the brain to answer some of the why questions with the what's of life. And then you can get those data and send them back to the right-hand side and say, yeah. And so God wants me to live a good, upright life full of meaning. How am I going to do that with respect to my job and my marriage and my commute and my sandwich and everything? And those are all left-brain questions. And so I try to sort those out to make sure that those are good and right and everything. And I send the data back over, and then I can integrate them into my fully Christian lifestyle, and then I'm living right.
That's amazing. I love that integration. I kind of want to land by just taking a moment to talk about like emotions, right? So we've been talking about all these like big picture ideas. And I think, getting a handle on your emotions seems to be a critical part of that equation.
For sure.
And so just from a high level, how would you coach somebody on how to frame their emotions, to look at their emotions?
Yeah. Most people don't understand their emotions. To begin with, they call them feelings, which is fine. But the whole idea is you have good and bad feelings. And the goal in life is to have more good feelings and have fewer bad feelings. That's a complete misapprehension about what emotions are. Emotions are data. Emotions are information about what's going on in the outside world and whether or not you're perceiving a threat or an opportunity. A threat that you're perceiving will be, it's detected by lower order structures of the brain that were developed more than 40 million years ago and that we have in common with all the lower animals like snakes and lizards. Most of the stimuli you're getting are below your level of consciousness. That information is being sent to the limbic system of your brain, which is newer, and it was developed between 2 and 40 million years ago. And this whole console of tissue deep in your brain called the limbic system is dedicated to producing emotions in response to those first set of signals. There's a threat out there. It stimulates something in your limbic system to give you a negative emotion that is information saying, avoid that thing. The reason that it's unpleasant is so you'll know to avoid that thing. It's just information. Or if it's something that you want to approach because it's an opportunity, it'll be a pleasant thing saying, go over and eat that thing. Oh, you see that beautiful colored thing at the top of that tree? Go climb that tree and pick it and eat it because it's probably got lots of sugar in it. And it's going to give you, and that pleasure is that positive emotion based on pleasure is a signal that it's a good source of calories, is the way that works out. So the way for us to understand our emotions is information. And you can't avoid it, and you need the information. The problem is when you're not managing that information. Don't get rid of that information, manage that information. And the way that you do that is by transferring that information to the third part of your brain, the newest part. It's only 250,000 years old, which is the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain right behind your forehead that processes the C-suite. It processes information. It's your executive centers of your brain. If you give yourself time and you have the awareness of what's actually happening in your own emotional life, you can make decisions about what your emotions are, what they mean, and what you choose to do. Emotional self-management is about all the techniques for going from stage 2 to stage 3. That's a lot of what I train executives to do. That's what I spend tons of my time doing with young people, and especially people who are in significant leadership positions, to not be managed by their emotions, but rather to manage their emotions to greater success and greater happiness in their life.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, you also, what was very big for me when I read your book was also the idea that these negative emotions do serve a purpose. And so what would be kind of like a final word on when do they become a problem, right? So I'm thinking about depression or mental health issues or anything like that. When should we become okay, there's a maladaptive effect that these negative emotions are having on my life?
To begin with, don't fall prey to misconceptions about negative emotions. Number one, they're not switches, they're dials. when somebody says, you have depression, you have anxiety. I say, no, 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 no. We all have depression and anxiety because we all have sadness and fear. Anxiety is nothing more than unfocused fear, and depression is a kind of a magnified form of sadness. So that has a lot of maladaptive properties to it. We all are on a spectrum from these things. The question is when it goes past a certain point, it starts to overwhelm us and it becomes unmanageable. So number one, think of your emotions as a dial, not as a switch. Don't get diagnosed as having something and then have your goal be to no longer have that. What you want to do is you want to manage your emotions below the level where they work for you and they don't interfere with your life. The second thing to keep in mind that a lot of people don't understand, especially young people today, is that if you have aversive emotions, anger, fear, sadness, disgust, you're normal. You're normal. There's that, don't pathologize negative emotions. You know, if you go to campus counseling or something and you say, I'm feeling really sad and I'm feeling really afraid, they're very likely to talk to you as if you're broken. No, no, no. At my university, at Harvard, if you're not sad and afraid, then you need therapy. It's a hard place to be. Yeah. It's a normal thing. You're exposing yourself to something difficult so that you'll know more, so that you'll be stronger. And that's a beautiful thing, to be sure. The question is it passing a threshold where it's becoming unmanageable and it's overwhelming you and it's actually managing you? Yeah. At that point, then it's a good idea to actually have somebody help you to manage your own emotions below the threshold such that you continue to have negative emotions. Congratulations. You'll get to live to fight another day because of those negative emotions, but they're not actually making it impossible for you to live your life.
That's so good. Well, Arthur, thank you so much for your time today. I think, you I've studied the science of happiness for all these years. You teach at Harvard about it. You wrote this book, but I found to be most remarkable is even just the case study of your own life of like putting these things into practice. And I've seen you said other places that it has increased your happiness even from like a numerical statistical standpoint. And so I hope that people kind of take that away from today's conversation, that these are truths, it's science, it's real actionable data here, that if they put it into practice, it will lead to a happier life. And so, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.